Call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of Monday, March 25th. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting? Councillor Forster, Councillor Adey, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Moved. So first we have, first I'm going to read a statement. Statement of the chair for the Committee of the Whole meeting. For those of you present this evening and for those watching via television or online, let me please explain the Committee of the Whole meeting. It is a committee that consists of all members of council. This meeting allows council members to deal with the issues in greater detail, but in less formal than a regular council meeting. During this meeting, issues are not formally adopted, but recommendations may be made at the next regular council meeting. At that time, the recommendations of the previous Committee of the Whole meeting will be adopted and acted upon. Some key points to remember when making your presentation are: remember, council meetings are televised, and it is very important to introduce yourself and, if applicable, name of the organization that you are representing, and speak directly into the microphone in a clear voice. When presenting, please address any comments or questions to the chair of the meeting. Keep your presentation brief. 5 minutes would be ideal, as council has several presentations on the agenda. Once you have completed your presentation, please ensure you summarize any requests or concerns. Remember, there will be no decisions made at this meeting on any requests or concerns you have made. Lastly, requests will be referred to staff for review, report, and recommendation to council. So first we have petitions and delegations. We have AltaGas. So if you'd like to step forward. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jennifer Osmar.
Or just turn the mic on.
There. Let me start again. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Osmar, Senior Director of External Affairs and Indigenous Relations with AltaGas. And I'm here with Sean Campbell.
Good evening. I'm Sean Campbell. I'm the construction manager for AltaGas for an upcoming development project that we have.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. We do have a presentation that I will do my best to share. Great. So we will do our best to keep our presentation efficient and concise, respecting your time. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So AltaGas is no stranger to Prince Rupert. We've been operating in your community for 5 years now with the RIPET project, the Ridley Island Propane Export Terminal. And we're here today to give you an update on RIPET, as well as to give you an update on our REEF project, which we'll go into more detail on. And so I won't spend a lot of time talking about the broader business. I would really like to focus on what we're doing here in Prince Rupert and why Prince Rupert is such an important part of our business. I'll briefly introduce AltaGas for those who may not be as familiar with our company. AltaGas is a North American energy infrastructure company. We have a midstream business in Canada, and we have a utility business based in Northeast United States. For the purposes of this evening's presentation, we're going to talk about our business in Western Canada. AltaGas's energy export value chain, sharing our energy with the world. We're very proud to be the first West Coast propane export terminal right here in Prince Rupert on Ridley Island. We move propane and butane, LPGs as we call them, from our facilities in Northeast British Columbia, as well as product that we get from Alberta. And we move propane and butane via rail, CN, to our RIPET facility on Ridley Island. We also have a second facility down in Ferndale, Washington, where we move propane and butane via the CP rail. So we've been operating here in Prince Rupert almost 5 years now, the propane export facility that we call RIPET, and we've been operating down in Ferndale, Washington for 3 years. I'm very pleased to give you a brief highlight on the operations of RIPET over the past 5 years. We commissioned the facility in May of 2019. We have approximately 42 employees on site, and we're proud to say that 88% of them are local. We move propane through the facility via CN Rail, and the export destination is Japan and South Korea. The project development work that we did with your community and the community of Port Edward, as well as communities along the rail corridor, including Terrace, communities really informed the development of RIPET. We learned about the community values, what your cares and what your concerns were and are. And as a result of what we heard from community, we developed what we call community partnership programs. And we're very proud of being able to develop programs that are informed by community and to be committed to those programs through the life of our operations. The first of our community programs is our Indigenous Workforce Program. When we developed the RIPET facility, we made a commitment to local communities that we would train and hire locally. So in collaboration with local Indigenous communities, Coast Mountain College, we developed the RIPET Operator Training Program. We had a very successful customized program for local students to train them to be operators at the RIPET facility. We had an 80% graduation rate, 65% of our graduates were from local Indigenous communities, and we hired 100% of our graduates on the commissioning of the facility. We just recently celebrated the 5-year anniversary of our graduates at a community celebration, and we're very proud of this program, and we've operationalized it. We have this program as part of AltaGas's midstream business, and we invest every year in opportunities to train across our operations, Northeast BC, here in the Northwest, as well as our facility in Washington State, to train and hire locally with Indigenous communities. Our second community partnership program is what we call our rail safety program. We heard from communities that rail safety is of utmost important, and we share at AltaGas, we share that value of safety. And so partnering with CN and ERAC, which is Emergency Response Assistance Canada, we brought LPG firefighting training into communities before our facility was commissioned. So in early 2019 was our first training course. We bring LPG firefighting training to local fire departments along the rail corridor. And we've operationalized that program as well. So we bring training into communities along the CN corridor from the Northeast, from Fort St. John, all the way here to Prince Rupert. And we do that every second year. So last year we trained here in Prince Rupert, Port Edward, Terrace, and so we'll be back here in 2025. This year we'll be training in Smithers, Prince George, in Fort St. John, and in Jasper. And our third community partnership program, of course, is our community investment program. And this slide presents a sampling of some of the local investments that have been guided by the community of Prince Rupert that we're very pleased to be able to invest in. And we look forward to continuing that relationship with Prince Rupert. The community partnership programs that we developed as a result of RIPET laid the foundation of how AltaGas partners with local Northwest communities and those along the corridor. As AltaGas and our joint venture partner Vopak move into the pre-FID phases of our new project, REEF, Ridley Island Energy Export Facilities, it's our commitment to apply the same community partnership orientation as we did with RIPET to the development of REEF. So we wanted to come to you today early before we make an FID decision on the project to give you an update on where we're at with REEF, to answer any questions, and again, to maintain that commitment of how AltaGas will engage with your community moving forward. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sean.
Thank you, Jennifer. So without the foundation of the community relationship and a good solid foundation to build on, it's difficult to build into the next phases and next projects. But with that foundation laid, this becomes kind of our next step in moving forward. So there was a joint venture partnership formed in April of 2023 with Vopak and AltaGas. We've been working on this project, putting significant effort over the last year, basically, with AltaGas. I've been involved in this project for 3 years. So I came with the Vopak folks into the community. So I've been involved in the community now for 3 years. I came up here. I'm 5 days away from 3 years. So April 1st will be 3 years for me. We are expecting an FID result here in Q2 of 2024. So we're very close to that piece. There's lots of activity and moving parts right now. Some of the key attributes to our project: it's a 190-acre development, long-term lease with the Prince Rupert Port Authority. Key permits from the federal and provincial governments are in place as we speak. Marine infrastructure is a key piece to this. The jetty that will be constructed is approximately 1.2 kilometers. It has a multi-buoy mooring system, so it's a bit unique to North America, but it's wide used throughout the area, and we've worked extensively with local pilots to make sure that everyone's familiar with this. The Uplands infrastructure is total permitted storage of approximately 600,000 cubic meters of product and about 8 kilometers of additional rail track infrastructure. The Reef Project and community update. So we've received our provincial and federal environmental determinations for both onshore and offshore, including the rail and storage for our processing facility. Permit to store and export LPGs, methanol, clean petroleum products is what that whole package includes. As part of that, with our environmental commitments, we have by 2050, a credible net zero plan is under development, and we're working hard to have that in place, as well as a GHG emissions reduction plan and wetland function compensation plan. Our Indigenous and local communities, capacity funding agreements and long-term mutual benefit agreements are in place with all six nations currently. So we're just working through those agreements. There's lots of moving parts, as you can well imagine, but we're closing in on having all those in place. Indigenous procurement plan, we're working hard with that. I'm very engaged in that with all of the, not only Indigenous groups, but the local groups within the community. You can't build a project like this without their help. Indigenous and local training and employment plan. Jennifer kind of alluded to that, but it goes even beyond the operation entity. It goes into the construction and the trades piece. That's where I'll be very involved in trying to bring local contractors and companies in with competent and qualified people here and training more and more people in this community. Let's go ahead there. Oh, and the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. I am a member of that committee. Every quarter we meet with various different stakeholders. It's kind of a great meeting. We get a chance to update people quarterly on what's going on and also find out any pressure points that communities are seeing, feeling, and come up with a strategy collectively on what we can do to improve it, make sure that we've got a plan so that we don't just struggle as we move forward as a collaborative group. So some of the early works that we've completed so far, we spent extensive effort in our archaeological assessments of the areas. We've harvested and cataloged the various culturally modified trees within our development footprint. You can kind of see that in this slide. It has a picture of the area. We've established our sediment and erosion control components. That'll continue to be enhanced as our project develops. But right now we need to have that infrastructure in place before we get too far into our build. The tree clearing and merchantable timber salvage has been basically completed. We're into burning, and we have been for the last just over 5 weeks now, and we're hoping within the next week or so we should be complete the burning program out on our site. The current pre-construction activities, that burning of that waste wood, we've brought in air curtain burners to enhance the burning techniques. You can see in this photo, there's various different piles of burnable material. We've forwarded all those piles to one central location, the furthest possible place that we can get from any community or any place. And these burners act as almost a superheater for the wood consumption, which minimizes the amount of time that we affect the community and significantly reduces the emissions and the smoke that comes off of there. Our opacity, we manage it every single day, multiple times a day, and live within the guidelines. So it's a new technique to Ridley Island, and I think it'll be incorporated longer term by most of the tenants there that have other projects. We're beginning the site drainage. I don't know if you're familiar, but this area, it seems to be a little wet. Rains from time to time, but out here, we're trying to combat that. We've got ahead of it, and we're draining the areas, making sure that we manage the water very well before it egresses our site so that we don't cause any turbidity or issues within the other water bodies surrounding us. We're doing that through various different techniques of cutting finger drains and pumping and all kinds of mechanisms. Currently assessing the site development for additional areas as we work through our design parameters. Sometimes you identify this area we might need to expand, this area we might need to expand for this development. So we're working close with our engineering teams as we work through our footprint development.
Thanks, Sean. And just to conclude, we want to give you a sense of our next steps. So we do continue to advance toward a final investment decision, which we intend to make by the end of Q2 2024. We are continuing to advance our early works, as Sean described. We have kicked off our dialogue with Coast Mountain College to explore a reef operator training program. And we continue to engage with local and Indigenous communities. We're open to any questions that you may have. And again, thank you very, very much for this opportunity to connect with you tonight.
Sure, I'll go first. Thank you for the presentation. Just a little background before I ask I've got a couple of questions. I'm a little past my third year, and I remember when Ridley Island was a place that we walked, and we walked the dogs. Of course, it's changed significantly since then, and we also had the tour there a couple of weeks ago. And for those of us that remember the island as it was, there is a side to experiencing that is a bit of a shock, I have to say. So, and I appreciate that industry needs to happen, development needs to happen. It has to happen somewhere, and that's where it is. I am interested, though, in a couple of aspects of that. I saw a point on your slide there, the wetland function compensation plan. I'm just wondering if you could give me a little background on what that is, because if I'm interpreting it correctly, that speaks to a little bit of what maybe has been lost out there.
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate. I've heard often that Ridley Island was very accessible for people to be able to swim and have picnics and just enjoy access to the water, and so I can appreciate that things are largely different now. We, through the environmental assessment process, we were required to and have committed to this wetlands compensation function plan. And that work we are undertaking now with our local Indigenous communities to explore what is meaningful to the communities in terms of what that plan will look like. And so I don't have a lot of detail to provide to you today on that because it's early days. But the work is underway in consultation with local communities, and happy to bring back more information as that plan develops.
Thanks. I look forward to hearing more about it. My second question is around the FID. It's pending, and kind of in light of the same background. And to me, the term FID means that they could decide yes and they could decide no. Obviously, nobody goes as far as this has gone without a pretty strong sense that it's going to be an affirmative decision. I am curious about what the plan is if it's not.
So we're moving forward very confidently toward an FID decision. We aren't there yet. We are still doing our due diligence with respect to capital costs, recognizing that over the past several years the costs to construct have increased. So we're doing the best that we can to find ways to manage that cost. This project will be built in phases, and so phase one of the project is an LPG project, so more LPG, similar to RIPET, but it will require the entire build out of a new jetty, new rail infrastructure, as well as the early work Sean referred to, as well as the uplands related to it. So it's an all-in upfront capital investment on phase one of the project. So we got to make sure we get that right, and so that's what folks are sharpening their pencils to do. But we're very confident that those numbers are looking good, and we're moving ahead with a lot of confidence toward that FID decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Forster.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I did have two questions. The first one, you mentioned waste wood is being burned. Can you tell me what that is? Is that like the branches off of trees? Is that the whole tree? So tell me a little bit more about that, and then what happens to the full trees, like the trunk?
No, very good. And maybe I didn't draw enough attention to that, but anything that was classified as merchantable timber has been salvaged and stacked in typical timber piles, and it's already been sent to market. So we've sent 21 loads of merchantable timber trees off of this footprint. This area has already been logged at one point in time in the past. So every tree that we could get to there, we dealt with that way. The waste wood consists of much of the branches and the things that you can't take to market, things like that, stumps, a lot of the deadfall that might have been laying down and riprap. It's been gathered and collected, piled up to season, and then incinerated, basically. So yes, anything that was classified as merchantable timber, we went to significant heroics to get them out of where they were and forward them to tree piles so that we could make sure we live up to our commitments there.
Thank you so much. That I really appreciate that clarification. My other question is, you mentioned a lot of work that you've done for training local firefighters and across the region. So am I correct in my assumption that that means that if there's a fire or some sort of an emergency, that the local firefighters are going to be leaving our community and going to Ridley, or what does that look like?
Thank you for the question. We have emergency response plans that are site specific for our RIPET facility, and we will have a similar plan for REEF. We do have a relationship with all local emergency response providers should there be an event on the RIPET facility. And so every year we have emergency response planning exercises that include the Prince Rupert Fire Department. And so RCMP, others. And so we have a coordinated plan should there be an event. We have significant capability on site that we manage. We have an emergency response trailer on site, and we have trained personnel within our operations to be able to respond as scale and scope would require. So Prince Rupert's emergency response resources are a part of that broader scale and scope of an event, and training is done annually. The training that we do along the corridor is in support of local fire departments should there be an event with an LPG rail car where they would be providing assistance. Um, Not the primary emergency response, but the capability for local fire departments to understand how to work with propane was identified as a significant interest and need. And so that training, that regular training, continues to provide local fire departments with making sure that folks are up to speed on the latest techniques. We understand, as since training began in 2019, that the training that we've provided to local fire departments has been most useful in backyard propane events. So thankfully, we haven't used resources to take them out of community, but to support. It's actually coming in very handy with local community response.
Thank you both so much.
If I could maybe add to that, you know, in what I do as construction work, we have to be trained to triage and deal with many different crisis situations. So enhancing that training to first responders is so important so that they're educated on what they could encounter when they roll into a site. As part of our build and our current design, we are planning for infrastructure that's going to be built long term throughout all phases, but primarily this needs to be built in this phase for all of our firefighting equipment, all of our infrastructure to feed for future developments and things like that. So our operations staff will be trained very, very well to deal with that initial crisis, but sometimes people need a rest in the middle of a crisis situation. So we just want people to understand how to support, and the whole community comes together in the event of a crisis typically. Thank you.
Councillor Randawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Two questions, like one, like if everything goes fine as planned, what's the timeline when you can expect like fully in operation? And second, during the construction time, so you expecting the workforce local or mix, or what kind be that?
Do you want to take that? Or?
I could take part of it for
Sure,
sure.
okay.
Thank you very much for the question.
Okay.
You know, every day I get asked this: how quick can you build it? How fast? When will we have it in service? So it's a great question. Right now we're heavily evaluating those pieces, and there's a lot of moving parts. We've got a lot of technology to come into place. Just a lot of long-term procurement items that are very specialized that have to come and be delivered here and the like. So our target is late 2026, early 2027 for the in-service date. That's kind of the best information that I could share right now. As far as the construction, what we're looking at is a phased approach with the initial infrastructure. So we've got a significant spend up front to get this infrastructure in place for all of the facility to build out over time. This piece here, we're going to try to fabricate several components off-site, which allows the specialized and technical people to build these intricate items and sleep in their own beds rather than bring them up here and cause strain on the community from an influx of too many people. So we're really mindful of the pressures that we could put onto a community that way. So you're trying to find the balance of what can we do off-site as well as what can we do on-site. There's significant civil construction, all of the assembly here on-site. It's so important that we do that over time. So again, we don't want to try to put too many people into a workforce into a small footprint, and you're working one on top of the other. So we're trying to load level our execution and meet a reasonable timeline with lower people on site. I always find that you get better productivity with the lower numbers of workforce. So our plan here is to work with the local communities. We've worked hard over the last little while. We're already out for several RFPs with the technology that we have here locally, and there's more in these local communities than people realize. So we're leveraging as much as we possibly can. I believe that our average or our peak resources out on our site is probably going to be in around the 250 people. We're anticipating and targeting 50 to 60% of those people being local through the construction life cycle. Hope that answers your question, sir.
Councillor Cunningham.
I have a few questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. First of all, on response, you said your firefighters. Are you going to have your own fire department out there, full time?
No, sorry. Apologies if that was not my intention to say our firefighters. So I probably misspoke when I said that. We do not have a fire department on Ridley Island. We have trained personnel within RIPET operations who are trained to support in the event of an emergency, but not our own fire department.
Okay, so we have a full-time fire department. Portage has a volunteer one. They're both excellent, but they don't have hazmat training. They don't have the specialized training that goes with the facility you're building. You know, like your borderline refinery here. So that type of training and the extra personnel is going to put a bit of a burden on our taxpayers to up the quality and level of our firefighting department, which is already stretched because of the industrialization around here. And Ridley Island being 10, 15 minutes away in an emergency is going to be, so are you going to be in any way upping the ante as far as contributing to our fire department and the extra firefighters we're going to have to hire and the extra specialized training? I don't mean just the, you've done some really good jobs training on short courses and that, but we're talking courses that are going to be a little more involved, like hazmat, for example, high angle rescue, confined space rescue, things like that. Those are all things that at the moment we're very weak or non-existent on. And they're all aspects of the fire department that are going to have to be trained up on. So that's going to put a lot of resources into play on that. So that's just, one of the questions that I don't think you can answer right now, but it's something to give food thought to. Now, you're talking about a phased level of construction, and you're talking at the peak 250. Now, on that phased level, is that 250 going to be over all phases or just periodically? And is there going to be a camp for the workers? Because the type of workers you're going to need, if you're planning on having this done by 2026, 2027, most of them are going to have to come in. We have a very limited specialized workforce to begin with, and the type of trades you need, you don't develop them in 2-3 years. These are tradesmen that are very specialized in what they're doing, and it's a very high degree of specialization on any type of that. So I'm just wondering if you're going to have a camp, and if so, where's it going to be, and things like that, because already we have a housing crunch in town, and it's a very serious. We've got less than 1% vacancy right now, and putting more strain on that is just going to burst at the seams. So having a camp is going to be very important.
Thank you for the question, for sure. There is a current camp sitting at Port Ed right now. It's a Watson Island camp. It's operated by some of our Indigenous partners as well as
Orion's North, yeah.
And it's a 150 person camp. We have been working heavily with that camp provider, and we plan to house most of our workers at most of our other town workers at that location. They also have provisions to build that 150 person camp into an additional 125 over and above that. So we've been mindful of exactly those pressure points that you have in your community, and we don't want to add to those strains. So our ask of all the contractors is that is the place we want to house our workers, and we want them to plan for exactly that.
that type of workers and that type of construction environment, are you gonna have your own medical staff, or are we relying on our hospital?
We will have a nurse practitioner on our site, and we're currently working out the health and medical services plan with Northern Health here to make sure that we understand where the pressure points are, what we need for our project to make sure that we don't cause undue strain on that. So we've already agreed to having a full-time nurse practitioner through the heavy part of our construction piece, and we're still finalizing our plan if there's additional pieces needed.
I'd be very interested in that plan, because we're already having problems.
Certainly understand that.
Yeah.
And I see the announcements and those pressure points. So
Yep. Now,
we've been mindful of that for the last while, and continue to work hard with the Northern Health on that.
how many trains a day are you planning on bringing in?
For the REEF project, the first phase of the project, which is LPG, we're anticipating approximately 75 cars per day for that first phase.
Second and third?
It could move up to about 90 additional cars. We're anticipating approximately 75 for LPGs and then 90 for each of the additional commodities, should those commodities come online.
So that's at least 2 trains a day coming in and 2 going out empty.
I think that your math might be right on that, the number of trains, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just, it's a lot of traffic,
Yeah.
and we're already in.
Yeah.
One aspect of that rail line that we're concerned about right now is there's the only level crossing between here and Prince George, and with some of the problems we're having with Northern Health and ER and things like that, they're having to transport people to Mills Memorial. Now, level crossing with the train there is another 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending when you get there.
Mhm.
So, those are all aspects of the working part. The other part is when LNG first was projected to be what it was here, we did a couple studies on the social impact and economic impact on the city, because it's going to be all our services that are used. We're going to be the service center as well as the entertainment center and everything else. It's going to have an impact on our policing, our healthcare, and everything else. So have you done any work towards that?
So I really appreciate your comments and your questions. You're asking industry all the right questions. So I want to acknowledge that Prince Rupert, we recognize the challenges in Prince Rupert, and I'm just grateful that you're asking us the hard questions, because you should be. And we as industry, we recognize that it's our responsibility to understand what the pressure points are, what the pain points are, and to find ways that we can make a difference and contribute where we can. A couple of points I'd like to make. The CSIC committee that Sean referred to, the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. So that is a commitment that we have to meet quarterly with local communities, and the City of Prince Rupert has a representative on that committee. Mm-hmm. That is an opportunity for us to continue to have this dialogue on those pressure points in the community, to understand them, to give feedback on how construction is going, and to get feedback from the community. So we're committed to that throughout construction of the project. So I want you to be assured that we will be in constant dialogue on that. Mm-hmm. And we will be listening for feedback from the community on our performance and how we can improve. Yeah. I also wanted to recognize that the RIPET facility, and then with the REEF facility, we are a significant local taxpayer here in Prince Rupert, and we understand that our tax revenue is going to important local initiatives such as the RCMP, and so we are pleased that the revenue that we can provide to the City of Prince Rupert through property tax payments are going to those important initiatives, and REEF will contribute to the City of Prince Rupert in the same fashion.
Okay, and don't get me wrong, because I think Halter's been a great corporate sponsor in a lot of ways. It's been a great corporate company to have in the community. And so far, it's been a great working relationship for the community in different cultural things and things like that. So, you know, I compliment AltaGas and VOPEC on that. And it's just
Thank
that
you.
we're getting into this phase again of LNG type. And there's questions that have
Yeah,
to be asked. but-
Absolutely.
and I worry about more our firefighters than anything, because, you know, I've been involved in environmental response for most of my life with Coast Guard, and I know the dangers involved, and, you know, just, we've been really lucky with our traffic. CN and OPEC and everyone else is very diligent. They don't want anything to happen
That's right.
and that, so they're very diligent on everything they do. And
That's right.
and Alta, I know people that work out there, and safety. It's really nice to hear,
Well,
because, you know, you get a lot of companies that start getting a little lax and look out. But there's questions that I thought had to be asked. But thank you very much for
Absolutely.
your presentation. I'm quite impressed.
appreciate that very, very much, and we look forward to a long, long relationship with Prince Rupert. And we share your values, we share your safety values, community values, and this dialogue will continue. So we're committed to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for your presentation. It's great. I hope to hear a positive final investment decision, and you know, I think you've answered a lot of questions tonight, and I'm sure that over the next couple of years, if you do go ahead, we'll figure out a plan for everyone.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your contribution to the taxes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
The
it.
uncapped part.
That's right.
Next time we have Paul Adams from the BC Rural Health Network via the screen here.
Good evening, Your Worship, honourable members of council. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
I have a short presentation for 5 minutes, and then any questions you may have. I'm requesting the membership of Prince Rupert to join the network, and I am the executive director of the BC Rural Health Network.
Okay, go ahead.
So if everything is working okay, you should see a couple of my granddaughters on the screen there.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, and honourable members of council for the opportunity to meet with you today.
Just one sec. We're going to get the volume up on
from
that.
the Upper Similkameen and the traditional territory of the Silks First Nation, home to the We are.
Is that good?
Are you good now?
Yeah, we can try it again.
Okay.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. Oh, you have to share your screen again because we're not seeing anything.
Oh, sorry.
We're just looking at you. We're not hearing you at all right now.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there we go.
Technical glitches here. I'll fix it right up.
There we go. We see your granddaughters again.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, and honourable members of council for the opportunity to meet with you.
Just a sec. We're going to have to try and figure this
I'm
out.
presenting today from the Upper Similkameen and the
It's really quiet. Can you turn it up on your end?
Nation, home to the Upper I'm at full volume on my end. And just outside the community of Princeton, BC.
We have come today to request your membership in our network to help increase the voice of rural residents on their health and well.
Okay, try it again and we'll see if it works this time. It's just really quiet.
If not, I'll just talk instead of providing this. Just 1 second.
Thank you, Your Worship, and honourable members of Council for the opportunity to meet with you today. I am presenting today from the Upper Similkameen and the traditional territory of the Silks First Nation, home to the Upper Similkameen Indian Band, and just outside the community of Princeton, BC. We have come today to request your membership in our network to help increase the voice of rural residents on their health and well-being. We are in a healthcare crisis, and increasing our voice is critical to ensure rural health equity is realized and stabilized throughout our province. The impacts of not addressing rural healthcare affects everyone. It is time to address the unique nature of rural challenges which require rural-specific solutions. We are a collective of individuals, rural health advocacy groups, rural volunteers, rural healthcare providers, rural research groups, and nonprofits who provide rural programming and support. The group originally formed as a collective of local advocacy groups who championed rural health during the centralization of services. We have grown, and we are growing rapidly. Our purpose is to share successful strategies in an effort to address rural healthcare concerns. We advocate for policy changes that provide all rural residents with attachment to a healthcare practitioner. We identify areas of research aimed at improving access to healthcare in rural communities and provide fertile ground for research to take place. We inform the Ministry of Health in regards to rural healthcare concerns and recommend solutions to the improvement of services to rural BC residents. We work in partnership with other provincial organizations to influence policy change that improve access to healthcare services. We recognize the healthcare concerns of Indigenous communities and include their issues and concerns as part of our work. And we improve access to mental health services and addiction support services. We promote patient-centered community-based primary healthcare reform. We are a conduit of communication. We listen to our membership and the general public and hear about community-level challenges. We transfer knowledge to our membership and the general public from trusted sources. We also transfer knowledge from the membership and the general public to governments. And we provide local and regional solutions to authorities through high-level interaction with policymakers. We inform the grassroots of our communities, our volunteers, our hospice workers, our community services, and generally work to improve the recognition of rural healthcare providers. Community volunteers are the backbone of the BC Rural Health Network. We advocate for equity in health outcomes for all British Columbians, for the ability to live in place in rural BC, for a robust public health care system, for science-based management and solutions, and for community-centric care and community-based health management teams. We are apolitical, we are solutions-based, and we are a registered charity. We are here today to ask for you to join us. Your community voice is needed and wanted by our network. As the saying goes, once you've visited one rural community in BC, you have visited one rural community in BC. Each community in rural BC is unique and has its own unique problems and solutions. We cannot champion each individual problem faced, but we can find common areas that will improve health and wellness for many rural communities. Rural residents are resourceful and resilient, and we have solutions to offer. With a louder voice, we will ensure we are not just listened to, but heard. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your time, and if you have any questions, we are happy to answer them.
Is there any questions? Councillor Forster.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. First, if somebody wanted to get involved, how would they contact you?
You can reach out through our website, which is bcruralhealth.org. And you can see there's a full suite of resources and information available there on variety of information for rural residents, membership information. We have a library blog where we post out current relative news articles daily. And we do a lot of work within the media, and we publish that out on a daily basis as well.
Thanks. My next question, I notice you're apolitical, but you do communicate different concerns to the Minister of Health. The parliamentary secretary for rural health happens to be our local MLA. Is she
Yes.
brought into these conversations? How does that work?
I work very closely with Parliamentary Secretary Rice. I work with the Minister directly. I work with anybody who has an interest in rural initiatives and healthcare. So we don't work, we're nonpartisan. We work across the political aisle. So anytime that we're meeting and we're presenting a solution or a position forward, we do that apolitically. So we work with Shirley Bond, Sonia Furstenau, with John Rustad, with the entire political process.
Thanks. And my last question, you mentioned you work with healthcare providers. Can you tell me a bit more about what that means? Is that individuals? Is that some of the healthcare unions? Is that something different? Just trying to flip my two different hats on.
Yeah, so we feel that there is very good representation for the physician voice in rural healthcare and in healthcare generally. And we work closely, though, with the Rural Coordination Centre of BC, which is kind of the rural divisions of DOCS of BC. But we're more interested in promoting the frontline grassroots workers in healthcare. So we're working closely right now on issues around nursing. We work with Adrian Gear, with Angela Wignall, with the nurses unions, in looking at how we can start improving the current situation with agency nursing, for example. We work very closely with UBC, the Centre for Rural Health Research, and with Dr. Jude Cornelson, who does a lot of work around travel and maternity access and information supporting our positions that we bring forward. So we really reach out, and we try and represent voices which are typically not heard within the conversation. And probably the biggest part of that is representing community voice and bringing community back into the conversation on healthcare. During regional centralization, we really threw the baby out with the bathwater, and we stripped community voice from the policy development process. So we actually just wrapped up a big research paper on the gap between policy development and community engagement, and that is that's gaining a lot of interest and traction, both within the Ministry of Health, but more broadly. And again, we're looking at means to re-engage communities effectively to ensure that their voices are heard about their local healthcare concerns.
Thank you.
Councillor Eady.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I clued in fairly early on that I had to read the subtitles because it was quite hard to hear. I did have a look. I spent a little time in your website this afternoon, and I would recommend anybody who's interested in learning more to visit the Rural Health Network website. It's well constructed, it's informative, it's worth spending a little bit of time with, and it presents the work, I think, in a positive and effective light. Part of what you've done is you've made a pitch for us, presumably meaning the city of Prince Rupert, to join the Rural Health Network. And I know that conversation with MLA Rice, she said the same thing. She regards it as a positive organization to be involved with. So my question then, I noticed in looking at the composition of the board, the closest board member, if I remember correctly, was Burns Lake.
Fraser Lake.
Is it Fraser Lake? Okay.
Yeah.
I sometimes get which one comes first mixed up. So if we were to join, I guess from an organizational point of view, as well as from a practical point of view, what do you see that would change if we were to join regarding our ability to address the issues we face? Because it's no secret in the community, there are some pretty serious issues, but also our representation in the broader effort that your organization represents. So what impact do you see us joining having on us?
So, first of all, let me apologize for the sound on the presentation. It's very clear on my end, and I'm sorry that it wasn't on your end. And I would much prefer to be there in person and give you an in-person presentation, but that's a limiting factor for me currently. But in regards to our board structure, we have our vice president in Fraser Lake, and I have two other executive members in Northern BC. So I do have Fort Nelson as being our secretary, and our treasurer is in Burns Lake. We do have a fairly scarce membership in the north, but that is again more to do with my ability to reach enough communities, and we are currently, underfinanced from the standpoint of being able to do more. But with what we have, we try and do a lot. Every member is welcome to get involved. We have a group called our Implementation Committee, and we really do bring the brightest minds in the province together. And we look at the challenge that we're facing, and then we collectively create solutions around those challenges. And then we support them with the research and evidence that I was talking about. So we're very open to involvement and engagement with all of our members. We don't tackle individual problems, and I believe your closure tonight is hopefully your last one. But it's a problem that you recently encountered, but we've encountered across the province for way too long. So we're looking right now at putting in suggestions on contingency planning about how we can prevent these closures in the future. And again, that's a cooperative effort to bring people and communities that have been affected. Fort Nelson, Masset, North Island, looking at the interior and the Slocan Valley. There's just been so many emergency closures, and they're all in rural and remote communities. None of them are impacting urban centers, and we see that that inequity needs to be addressed too.
Thank you very much for saying it and for saying that in that way. I appreciate that.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to advise that I have been received a message that people on the streaming can hear the presentation. It was just in the room, so everyone else was able to hear it. So we will be able to hear it on playback should anyone want to.
Sounds
listen.
good. Sounds good. Anyone else? I just had a question myself, and that was, you mentioned discussions about like nursing, like travel nurses and that. Has there been much discussion about about doctors in the rural areas, and what any plans to maybe have incentives, schooling incentives where people work in the north if they're to train for the north.
Yeah, again, that's been a big position of ours. I was speaking with Steve Raper last week, and we had a good hour dialogue, and he is VP of Communications for Northern Health, as I'm sure you're aware. And again, part of the challenge that we face across rural BC is the lack of recruitment in rural communities. And if we're only picking urban students to fill these new seats, to create new positions for the future, then those students are likely to return to urban environments. So we really need to do a better job of recruitment of students from rural and remote communities across the province. We've been a champion of the physician's assistants and bringing more physician's assistants into play. That's now been regulated. So physician's assistants are basically monitored by a physician, but work independently of a physician. So it's a really good way to extend, a single physician into a multiple role. And we see that as playing a big part in emergency medicine, but also in primary medicine, and looking at how we can do more in that way as well. Team-based practice becomes a key. We've stripped very low acuity care procedures and we've moved them into larger urban centers. And in doing that, we've reduced the quality of the team in rural environments. So we really need to start decentralizing some of those lower acuity procedures back into rural community. That creates a stronger skill set within your medical team, and that provides a better resource for recruitment and retention of people who need to practice to their scope of practice, so that they can actually, do the work that they've been trained to do.
Go ahead, Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, all great ideas, and that one of the biggest problems you identified it with the seats being taken by students that aren't from the north, but there are models in the country where if you take a seat in a northern institution of learning, you have to put X number of years into that northern area. And there can also be, part of it's going to be abused in one way or another, I should think. But agency nurses and that, we've created a culture that's sucking a lot of money out of the system and not encouraging people to work in their own communities or that. I had my blood taken by a girl that's from Kamloops, and she's thinking of going to the prairies just to see what the prairies are like. Things like this, we've created this situation where agencies are taking a lot of the money out of the system, and you've got people working side by side with inequality, even though they're both qualified to do the same thing, and that, and yes. These are things that definitely have to be addressed. And I like the idea of what you're doing. I think collectively, if we all get together, it's something we can, a collective voice sometimes is better than one remote voice. But it's definitely, it's not a unique situation. It's not just in northern BC. It's everywhere. So how we tackle it is still interesting.
It is near and dear to my heart, and to everybody within our organization, especially within the board level. I live in rural BC. All of the board lives in rural BC. We all face our community health challenges. My dad was a physician, a family doctor for 30 years here in a town of 2,000, and 20 years before that in the UK. And so, he retired at 75 because he didn't want to leave his patients stranded. And that's, the type of, position that isn't as common as it used to be, unfortunately. And people, are more interested in other things. But again, I think there's a way that we can extend physicians. The agency nursing piece is a huge problem. The inequity there for local nurses who are working for the health authority versus the ones coming in and traveling, it's almost night and day, not necessarily in pay equity, but in lifestyle equity, in the amount of on-call that you have to do and the overtime hours being put in. Those are all extremes that the local resident nurse faces, whereas the one flying in or coming in for a short-term visit doesn't. So we got to fix these problems, and they are creating huge imbalances and a lot of cost to the system. And it's been ongoing now for decades, unfortunately. So we've got a long trouble to rectify.
It looks like that's it for questions. So thank you for your presentation.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to add that it's a $50 ask that I'm making here, so it's not a big financial ask. It is just to demonstrate that you want to bring in your voice into the network. So we would certainly appreciate your membership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Prince Rupert Seniors Housing delegation.
Thank you for letting us speak. My name is Bruce Rempel, and I'm the former manager of Prince Rupert Senior Housing, which is operated by Columbus Homes. Behind us is John Arnold, he is the manager of the Prince Rupert Senior Homes in town, and a tenant here, Susan Byzantine, to help with what we're going to say. Okay, so the tenants asked me to represent them on an issue they've been having, and I'll go ahead. It says they're commonly okay. It says the residents of 630 Wayne Place, Prince Rupert, which is commonly known as Wayne Place Senior Housing. They're concerned about the quality of life, comfort, peace, enjoyment, and especially their rest at night. That's been greatly affected by the transport trucks creating unacceptable levels of noise as they park on First Avenue, in the mall, and in the entry to Home Hardware. The noise goes on from the evening to the early hours in the morning. It says on other occasions, they come early and they park up at Home Hardware. And besides the noise level, the fumes from the diesel is also affecting them. And I've got a letter here that's been signed by a bunch of tenants, and I like to hand it in after. But in other places, you've seen where they have like no idling, or there's been bylaws so you don't have this problem. And I know that out on the highway on Portage Avenue, there is a place that was for commercial parking. Mind you, if all the commercial trucks park there during the night, then you got the residents of like Raven and Comrade probably would have the same complaint, I would think. But if there was a place there was no idling, it might help. And I like Susan as a resident to talk to you about what she feels like when she's trying to sleep. Okay. Just tell them the truth.
Every night, sometimes they come at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock up to 5 o'clock in the morning. You won't be able to sleep because you can hear the noise, you can smell the fume and everything. So it's hard to sleep. I don't know what's the solution on that one. So in behalf of the thing, maybe you can do something for that, because we want to sleep as a senior. We want the peace, and every night it's like that. So how can you sleep at night if there are lots of noise on the truck? You can hear them every night. So it's hard.
Okay. Is there any questions from anyone? Okay, well, if you want to present your petition to our corporate administrator there,
Okay.
and thanks for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Is there any questions or inquiries from members of council? That seeing none, I'd like to adjourn to a regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Skelton-Morin and Councillor Eady. All those in favor? Opposed? No. It's moved. Okay, I'm going to call to order the regular council meeting for Monday, March 25th. I have a recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of March 25th be adopted as presented with the addition of consent correspondence C number 7, which is letters to Ciro Panessa and Ronald Chapman of Northern Health. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Eady, Councillor Randhawa. All in favor? Moved. So the first is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak from the public on anything regarding anything in the agenda? It doesn't look like anyone wants to come forward. So one more time, anyone? No? Okay. We will move on. The consent agenda. Can I get a motion to accept? Councillor Skelton-Morin, Councillor Cunningham. All those are actually any questions? Is there any questions about this? Anything that anyone would like to raise? Councillor Eady.
I will just note that the late items, the letters that have been included as a late item, represent one of the rather limited array of things that a municipality can do about a problem that we're all concerned about. For those of you that take the time to read them, I think you'll find that they are fairly strongly worded. Coming from my perspective, I think they needed to be. So I do recommend that people have a look at those if they get a chance, if they're interested.
Anybody else? So I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Any opposed? Moved. Next is reports. Rotary Club of Prince Rupert, band shell proposal, Pacific Mariners Memorial Park. The council directs staff to work with the Rotary Club of Prince Rupert in their efforts to fundraise and place a band shell in the Pacific Mariners Park to ensure consistency and compliance with current park plans, and that council provide a letter of support in principle to the Rotary Club of Prince Rupert for this project. Moved by Councillor Forrester, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any questions? Councillor Cunningham?
Our Director of Communications held some workshops, I guess you could call, about the parks and things like that. And this band shell came up. And the one comment that came from the public in that was the exposure of it to a southeast wind and rain, where the wind would be driven towards the performers and that. And Councillor Eady's a guitar player and that, and I don't know if he has any input on that or not, but you know, being up there with electronic gear and that, with the rain and wind coming at you instead of away from you, I don't know if there's any way we could position it in a different place than where they propose it. But I love the idea, and I'd like to pursue it one way or the other.
Councillor Eady.
I might even know who raised that issue with you. I remember when I had very long hair, a wind coming into my face had quite a dramatic effect. But I actually agree with the comment that it would be a problematic. I mean, there's a point at which outdoor events get canceled anyway under certain weather conditions, and I think that you might reach that point no matter which way it's positioned if under those circumstances. But if there can be some consideration given to that once the concrete planning starts to take shape, then I think that would be worthwhile.
yeah, I would think that I'm sure that could be mentioned to them. And yeah, so is there anyone else? No. Okay, so all in favor? Okay, that's moved. So next is the council roundtable. Does Councillor Adey with his hand up quickly?
Regarding his hair flowing in the wind once again.
Well, it was a look. A couple of things. One, just a note of appreciation for the group that spent some time down in Moresby Pond area cleaning up. I saw some photographs on Facebook, not that I spend much time on Facebook, with a prodigious product in terms of the amount of stuff that was cleaned up. So it's much appreciated when people step up and do those kinds of things. I want to acknowledge them. And also the person who lives in my neighborhood who probably doesn't want to be mentioned was doing the same thing solo today in the area where I live in. That's equally appreciated. My second question relates to what we are dealing with in terms of the emergency room closures. And I have a couple of questions. And it may be that a question could be directed to the corporate administrator on this one. Given that the ER has been closed, I'm just wondering if we have a sense of what extra precautionary measures have been taken to mitigate the risks that are created by the closure of an ER in terms of emergency service providers and so on. So I wonder if I could direct that question through you.
Yes, first I'll go through Dr. Buchan and he can choose to direct that wherever he likes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to defer that to Director Miller.
Thank you very much. So unfortunately, when the emergency department is closed, my understanding is that additional assets are brought in with BC Ambulance. I believe last night there were, I want to say there was 3 additional crews, so that would probably be 4 all in, as well as a critical care paramedic was available as well. So my understanding, at least in the short term while these closures are happening, that's what will be put into place in order to help residents. There is some additional information as well on the Northern Health's Facebook page about when to call 911, when to look for a virtual physician, those sorts of things. You can also find those links on the city's Facebook page where we've shared the information from Northern Health.
Councillor Adey.
Apologies for my tenuous grasp on chain of command. You've actually just managed to answer my second question, and that was based on the motion we passed to help disseminate information from Northern Health for the public. I'm happy to see that we are doing that.
Anyone else? Councillor Skelton-Morin.
Yeah, I think and a lot of the questions that I had have been answered. I guess I would just add the additional context, and I know that many are aware of this, but the North Coast nations rely on Prince Rupert as a regional hospital. Many of them are quite limited with a clinic, and a lot of the times they do not have a physician. They either have a nurse practitioner or a nurse that can respond. A lot of the times they rely very heavily on the emergency department for any serious trauma. Having said that, there is still quite the commute to get to Prince Rupert, and finding that there's closures, I would imagine Northern Health would have alternative measures in place, but anything serious of the trauma nature or anything cardiac, you have a golden hour to get somebody to a physician and medical team. Otherwise, their chances of survival decrease quite drastically after that. So just having said that, I know that it's critically important that we alleviate this issue, not only for Prince Rupert, but just for our region as a whole, as it is a regional hospital.
Yeah, and I don't know if the fellow that was speaking earlier, Paul, he had kind of made a comment there, and he made a comment saying that this sounds like this might be one of the last ones. So I don't know if he knows something that we don't know, as far as tonight being one of the last closures. So I don't know if that's if there's any truth to that, or if that's just what Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we want to see as much pressure from every which way we can to try and resolve this situation, because it's a terrible situation for our community to be in, and especially a community with a lot of industrial partners, and we need to be able to look after their employees if there's an accident, and this is definitely going to this is the top priority for our community right now in my eyes. We do need drinking water, but this is very important, and hopefully these letters that we've sent today and other conversations to be had in the next time will make it. Hopefully, we'll come to a resolution. Did you have something else, Councilor Forster?
Thank you. As I mentioned before, as a nurse, I'm really limited on what I can say about this. So if it's all right, I'd like to move on to a different topic because it's hard sitting hard. This is really hard to not say anything. I did want to actually thank staff, the Angus Apartments that have come down. That was a really great thing to see. I recognize that for many people in our community, it was a long time coming, but I wanted to pass on, I've heard from a lot of people in our community, gratitude that while it took a while, it's done, and look forward to more work from our city staff on getting more of those derelict buildings taken down. Thank you.
Councilor Cunningham.
Okay, on the Moresby cleanup, I echo Councillor Reedy's comments, but I'd like to point out one person that's been front and center, and that's Chantel Megason, who's organized not just that cleanup, but many others, and is already planning on more for the future. Now, on the ER closures, not only are the villages and that getting more and more dependent on places like that, but a lot of people in town that no longer have doctors have to go there for different things that normally didn't have to go there. So now that they don't have a doctor, they're going to be going there more and more. So it's crucial. There's all of a sudden the vulnerability is rising up in the community to the point where a lot of people, whether they're executive of a company, middle class worker, vulnerable person on the street, or somebody in a village that has to travel hours to get here with no doctor, are now going to that ER. So it's going to be used more and more until we solve this problem. And the ER is front and center on it, but getting family doctors is also important. And I've asked before, I'll say it again, I'd like to know the ratio of desks to beds in Northern Health, because you go to Prince George and there's desks everywhere. And you go to a local hospital and there's fewer beds all the time. So I really think the priorities have to be reversed a bit. I don't know how Northern Health is going to solve it, but I think it's going to have to go higher than Northern Health.
I guess I'll chime in on the Angus Apartments. I'm glad to see that some of the stuff's coming down too. A lot of people say it took a long time, and it sure did. And I want people to understand that that was not because of staff. That was because of a landlord that chose to drag his feet on many things. Even before that place burnt, he was known as one of the worst landlords in provincial history. Tenancy board actions against him. So. We've been trying for years, even before it burnt, to try and deal with that building, and it was definitely one of the worst ones. And finally, he left us the pleasure of gifting us a burnt building that we ended up getting on the tax sale. So we get to deal with it now, and that's the type of people that we have to deal with sometimes. It's great to see it down finally, and I'm sure you're going to see lots more of this in the future. In the next couple of months, there's going to be a lot more houses and buildings, and it's time to start, now that we can dedicate a little bit of resources to it, although we're stretched on other things like infrastructure. At least now we're starting to crack down on making it not acceptable to have plywood on your windows and other things in our community that, you know, it's actually kind of nice driving down 3rd Avenue now. It's looking a little bit better. I mean, we still got a long way to go, but it is getting better, and I appreciate what the staff has done to facilitate that. Thanks. And if that's everything, I guess that will be a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Forster, Councillor Skelton Morvan. All in favor? Moved.